Greetings, Gatehouse Insiders. Welcome back to another episode of Gatehouse Insights. On this episode, I welcome back the very well-known Mark Carrazzo, who is a coach, lawyer, and speaker, and the owner of Be Your Best Now. He is going to shed some light on mindfulness, meditation, and what we can do to be more grateful. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you've subscribed to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. Good morning, Mark. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Lou.
No worries. You've been a regular guest on our series, so it's great to have you back.
It's always a pleasure to be a part of them. Thank you.
So I wanted to begin with wellbeing, and what is wellbeing? Because we hear it so often, but I want to know what your meaning is behind the word wellbeing.
Wellbeing is a term that really reflects, I think, two aspects. It's a lot of positive mood that you have from moments of joy and happiness that you can get through the day. But the deeper meaning, I think, runs in conjunction with it, is having meaning in your life, having purpose in your life, having good connectedness with other people, having autonomy, the ability to do what you want. So I see the second part that I just spoke about then as being happy with your life, and the first part as being happy in your life. And you need both. So I see wellbeing as a construct which has the longer term things, but also has a generous amount of positive, what we call positive effect or positive mood.
And I suppose, can wellbeing mean different things to different people, or is it the same for everybody?
Look, I think partially because we're all different human beings with different goals and different desires and different ambitions, there is a difference. But for me, I think there's a few core values that must, I think, exist for everybody. And one of them is well-being of the body, being physically fit, health, making sure you've got plenty of sleep, having eaten well. There's well-being of the mind, things I spoke about before, having meaning and purpose, having autonomy, feeling that you're self-fulfilled. So there's that. And there's, of course, a very important aspect, which is just being connected with other people. It's our relationships with others. As I think I've said before on previous talks that I've done with you, is that we as a human race are made to be with other people. So it's having a connectedness too that's important.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you bring up connectedness, because during COVID, we haven't been so connected. And I feel like for myself and just other people around me, it's had an impact on their well-being. So yeah, how have you found connectedness during COVID, and how has it impacted others?
I think you make the fair point that from a starting position, we've all been a little bit challenged by the lack of connectedness. That there's an amazing amount of mental therapy that just comes every morning with saying something as simple as "Good day, how are you?"
Yeah. To
a workmate or someone you're putting, when you're putting the bins out, saying hello to your neighbour. That's essentially very good for us. I think fighting back from that, we've all found connectedness over Zoom. And the little bit of research I've done on that is that face-to-face social activity over the internet is reasonable quality stuff. So we've found connectedness through our technology. I've certainly tried to ring people a bit more. I've always relied on calls, but other people are different. So yes, it's been a big factor. It's been challenging, but there's been some gains in other areas, I think.
Yeah, interesting. In terms of well-being, do you think it's something that we can change or lift, or is it part of our DNA, our genetics? Because I often hear people say, oh, my mum's just like that, or my dad's like that, but can we change that?
That's a really good point. I mean, the research to date, which I wouldn't call enormously robust, tends to suggest that a significant amount of our happiness is a result of our genes. Some proportion is a result of our environment, what actually happens to us in life. And some significant part, though, is the way we choose to react and deal with matters and process matters ourselves. So genes are important, but they're not determinative. You've got a lot in your own hands that you can do for your own happiness. And I think that was to me, when I first heard that, an enormously powerful thing. because it's just such an important topic, human well-being, and that we can actually impact upon it ourselves by things that we do.
Now, moving on to positive emotions, can we get more positive emotions than others, or is it determined by what happens to us in our life?
It's hugely determined by ourselves. I'm not suggesting that some people don't have lives which are more challenging. I certainly accept that. A lot of the time, though, it's within our own powers to decide whether we're going to be grateful about things. For instance, we're going to reflect on the good things that have happened to us in life, whether we're going to take a walk in nature, whether we're going to choose to remember our last holiday on the north coast of New South Wales, reflect upon the nice things that happened to us, the beautiful mood it put us in, whether we make a decision to savour what might otherwise be perceived as a mundane thing in life, like a shower or eating something nice, and reflect upon it in a positive way. So we can create what I call not primary positive emotions, that transient emotion you get when you do experience true joy, but we can remanufacture secondary moments of positive emotions. And that's an enormously powerful thing. And you can actually train your brain to start looking for those things and scanning for them. So you can have an impact on how many positive emotions you're getting.
How do we train our brain to look for those emotions?
It's by doing it. It's by repetition, basically. I certainly know that you can train your brain to look for negatives. Certainly in the job I've done as a lawyer, I've been, in a sense, hired to look for problems in documents and in contracts, which I have to alert my client to, and I know what happens when you do that. The flip side of that, which is really positive that you learn from that, is that you can actually train your brain to look for positives. So practice and repetition, that's one of the real strong points I want to make today. It's like going to the gym. You can't say I'm fit because I went to the gym 3 weeks ago, so I'm doing fine. You've got to work at this every day. They say that when neurons fire together a lot, they eventually wire together. So it's repetition and looking for it becomes easier and easier.
That now you are a trained lawyer, as you've mentioned, and I know it can be quite stressful and at times. And every time I catch up with you or speak to you, you're always in a positive, upbeat. You're just always in a good mood. But how have you trained yourself to be in that positive mood most of the times?
That's interesting. I'm very happy that you have that observation of me. I don't see myself as always happy. I think I've done fairly well at the gene stake so far as happiness goes, but that's only a sort of a part of it. It's not everything. I think one of the great things of working in the wellbeing area is that if I do, through ambition or stress or taking things on, get to a point where I'm feeling a little low, the thing about it is I know where to go. The answers are generally on my desk. I've got to find some positive emotions, maybe look for a bit of nature on the weekend, have a swim, practice gratitude, quickly get the mind back to thinking about all the good things that happen. So it's just those little cues that you do learn, and this is why I'm so enthusiastic about the area. I really believe we can teach people and lift their well-being. That they're the things that I have and help me.
Yeah. I suppose, coming back to one of our core values in our business is positivity, and we've had people say that I don't like this core value, positivity. It's just too much for me. From I suppose a company point of view, and any business that is their core value is positivity, and they try to be positive. How do you deal with an individual that is against being positive?
It's a really good question. Not everybody wants to embrace positivity. Some people see their lives as being there for others, for instance, and they don't see or really outwardly want to aspire for happiness per se. And others, like the client, the colleague you're dealing with, doesn't like the word. Now, I try and get away from the stereotypical sort of words like happiness, if I can, and positivity, and drill down into the base elements of it. So I'd prefer to talk about something you're grateful for today, or something go well for you on your weekend, or highlight try and become aware of relationships that are important to that person and speak about them. So I get off that language if you can. I think try that and talk about gratitude, connectedness, relationships, that sort of thing. Small things in their life for which they're likely to be thankful.
Okay. And then that would obviously change their mindset because they're in a different headspace.
Absolutely. If you say positivity to someone who doesn't embrace positivity, you're going to activate certain parts of their system, their neuro system and their nervous system that's actually going to put them into a defensive mode. They're not going to embrace it. The absolute opposite is true when we bring up things that relax them and stimulate what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. So concentrate on the small things and get off the language that they're not comfortable with fairly quickly.
I like that because that doesn't just apply to like a colleague, it can apply to family, friends or anyone else to change the language. So
100%, Lou. And one thing I can safely say to you, very few people have an issue with gratitude. If you look through society, the history of the world, people that are grateful are liked. We want to accept and be a grateful human being ourselves. And the flip side is a fairly strong force against what we call ungrateful people. And generally, if we're talking about someone being ungrateful, there's generally a very unpleasant expletive that sort of follows after that to describe them. So gratitude's a really uniting word.
Moving on to mindfulness and meditation, because I know you're a big advocate for this and we always chat about it when we catch up. But how would you describe mindfulness and meditation?
Well, meditation is one of those words that, again, can sort of isolate people or sort of put them on the back foot a little bit because it's hard to understand, and they can sort of take a view that meditation means sitting in the one spot for an hour, and they can take a view that my mind doesn't sort of focus, it roams, so it's not for me. So there again, let's go back to really what meditation and mindfulness is. It's really focusing. It's focusing on something. I think it's pretty important to get your breath at the time you do it into a nice, slow, deep, rhythmic breath, which will actually calm your nervous system down and focus. Now, if that's still hard for people to follow, think of noticing. Just noticing things around you is a form of meditation. Even just being curious on your walks tomorrow by the beach, down the park, looking at the plants, looking at the sky and noticing where you are, that's starting to make you focus, starting to make you come inwards, starting to give you clarity. So that's the way I'd describe mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah. I was going to ask, and you touched on it briefly, but for people that don't like to meditate, so a lot of people think meditating is sitting in one spot for an hour or 15 minutes and breathing and that's it. For me, I can't do that. So, but what else, and I know a lot of others can't either, but what else can people do to be more mindful and more present?
Just concentrate on a moment basis on what you're doing every day. So what you might think is mundane or just a natural process of life, like taking a shower, for instance, what are you really doing? There's hot water running down your back. Where did that water come from? How does it make you feel in that moment? Do you feel a sense of gratitude? Or when you go to eat something or drink a glass of red, where did this grape come from? How does it taste? On the front of my tongue and on the back of my palate. Who are the people that were probably involved in that chain of producing that wine? So it's not just what I find great about being present oriented, it also makes you thankful and not dismissive of little things in life that are really are blessing you. So I just say, get into the moment. There's nothing too small to concentrate on or look at and observe, and take 2 or 3 deep breaths. And, a little bit of encouraging research that I read the other day, and I sort of feel is right from my own personal experience, is that 6 times 10 minutes of meditation a day can be more powerful so far as your well-being goes than 1 complete hour. And I think if you broke that down to and said, I've got 61 minute sessions of focusing on something, I think particularly nature or particularly something that that's associated with nature would even be even more beneficial. It's that calming the nervous system down, being thankful for what's in front of you.
Yeah. I like, you touched on it. You mentioned the word being more curious, and I really like it because sometimes we're not curious enough about things, and I've tried to be a little bit more curious about certain things, and that I found that really helps. So it's really interesting that you've touched on it.
I think curiosity is a great way to explain it to people. I'm not a social commentator. I think we've lost the ability in the race we're in to actually just stop and think and be curious. And I gave a presentation recently where I showed just simply the sky in the air, and a gentleman stayed back on the Zoom presentation and said to me, look, that meant a lot to me, because when I was a kid, I used to lie on my back in the farm and just look at the sky and get curious about the sky and look at the shapes of the clouds and their slow movement. I mean, just really beautiful stuff. I think it is. I mean, you're smiling. I am just talking about it. So we've really got to go back to some stuff that we've been dismissing, and it's really very simple. A lot of the answers are right in front of our nose.
And the reason why I'm smiling is because it's, that image of lying on your back on the grass. We used to do it in primary school, and I remember sometimes the teachers would be like, let's go out, lie on the grass, look at the clouds, and let's draw what you've seen. And it's interesting because back when I was in primary school, I can't remember how long, over 20 years ago, but mindfulness wasn't a big topic. But it's interesting because they used to get us to do mindful activities without us knowing about it. So
to the credit of the educators, I think that they're in a sense a long way ahead of the corporate environment and the business environment on a lot of these stuff, and they're doing a great job with helping kids. I just look at it as an adult as just a kid growing up. I still think we need exactly the same things in our lives, even though the busyness and the challenges have probably distracted us away from it.
So I wanted to talk about being in lockdown. Victorians have been in lockdown for over 7 months, and I've been speaking to people, and there's been pros and cons to it. But one thing that keeps coming up with everyone I speak to is that everyone's being more aware, and they've found things to be grateful for, and they want to go back to a much more slower paced working environment when we do go back to work. But that's all great while we're in still this transition phase, lockdown, can't go back to the office. How do we keep, when things go back to normal, say next year, how do we keep all the things we've realised or learnt during lockdown? How do we keep that going forward?
Yeah, it's certainly the challenge. I mean, the pressure will start to come on us a bit. We'll have time constraints again, but I'm really hopeful that people will realise that even in their normal workday, even when they're doing incidental things like walking to the train station in the morning, they can still look at a plant and focus on that, and in a sense have a mindfulness moment about that. Still lots of opportunities for us to find time to exercise, to savour a positive emotion. They're not necessarily time-dependent things. It's just a matter of will, to be honest with you, Lou. It's just a matter of us all saying, I don't want to slip back. I like the life that I've come to be accustomed with. I'm going to work at this the same way I work on my physical exercise. One
word you keep touching on, and you've touched on throughout our discussion, and a presentation I heard you speak on last week, was on gratitude. And I know it's quite an in-depth topic, and it's probably a discussion, a deeper dive in another time. But one thing your focus is on is trying to get your family as a whole to be grateful. Tell me, how do you do this, and how do you get everyone on the same page?
Just by talking about it a lot. So, come to dinner time, okay, kids, and my boys are young, they're 8 and 6. What were you thankful about today? During lockdown, we couldn't take our normal winter trip to the Sunshine Coast or somewhere up north. So I would look at the date and say, right, boys, you remember what we were doing July 27th last year? We were at the club when we were about to go for a swim. Yeah, wasn't that great? So I was trying to do is remanufacture those pleasant thoughts into their head. So it's about savouring and reflecting back, talking about it a lot, and seeing things differently. If you want a moment, the other day I handed my wife a cup of coffee and a bit of toast. And I wasn't going to say, here's your coffee and toast. I said, here's your full-bodied Arabica beans with your piece of sliced loaf with Australian wholemeal peanut butter spread on it. Just little things, if you think about it, can change the way we see things and put them in a grateful zone. You're right. I'm not really concerned whether my kids can't recite Einstein's theory of relativity. I'd rather them be grateful, because the science says that grateful people are happy and happy people are successful.
Yeah, that's fabulous. It's amazing. So, and you've got your boys at such a young age to be able to embed that as they grow up. So
let's hope they do that. They're starting to challenge their dad already. So fingers crossed.
Fingers keep at it. Just keep going. They'll be thankful when, they're in their mid-30s.
Well, it certainly wasn't the way. I'm certainly not knocking parenting styles of years gone by, but I certainly wasn't given any guidance on this sort of stuff. My mum was very positive, which was great, and so was Dad, and she'd talk in the same way. I think parents have an instinct for it, but we do have a lot of science now that we can go to, which is really exciting.
It is. Thank you, Mark, for joining me again this morning. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for having me, Lou.
And there you have it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel, where you can see more.